Hello everyone, it's Miss Leslie, your favorite teacher in the world. Today we're going to be reading a passage called the Nile. This is a nonfiction article and we're going to be doing a close read about this article. A close read means thinking while you read. This is something that's going to take some time and it's going to require rereading. Remember, in ESL class, we're always going to be reading some more complex text, meaning they're a little bit more difficult and they have to do with vocabulary from all different subjects, but we're going to practice really reading it closely and taking our time to analyze each and every part. Okay? And a close read is usually followed by some text-dependent questions. You're going to be answering these questions tomorrow with a group. So when you're reading, there might be some things that I'm going to bring your attention to so that you can remember them for tomorrow's class. Remember, we always want to justify our answers by citing text evidence and what we already know about life. So it's okay to use some of the knowledge in your brain that you know already, but you must combine it with some text evidence to support and to justify your answer. In just a second, I'll turn to the next slide. You might want to pull out the Nile passage worksheet that you have so that you can read along with me. Remember, at any time during this video, you can stop or pause the lesson to go back and hear me read certain parts again that might be difficult for you. Okay, let's begin reading the Nile, Egypt's Valley of Life. I'm going to be focusing on the first red box and pay close attention to where the yellow arrow is. There is probably no river in the world that means as much to the people who live along it than the Nile. From almost the beginning of history, the Egyptian people have lived near this river. Its waters help create a narrow band of green, fertile growth in the middle of a blistering, hot, dry desert. Nothing grows except where the river waters reach. For thousands of years, water from the Nile has fed Egypt's millions of people. Without the river, one of the world's oldest civilizations would not exist. To me, that last sentence is pretty powerful. And I'm also thinking closely about this sentence that says, for thousands of years, water from the Nile has fed Egypt's millions of people. Just thinking out loud, I'm beginning to wonder, how does a river feed people? And why is this river so important that an entire civilization, entire group of people would not exist without it? The Nile begins in the mountainous Central African country of Burundi. It flows northward almost 4,160 miles. It is the longest river in the world and passes through more than 9 countries. At its mouth on the Mediterranean Sea is a gigantic delta spreads out to a width of 150 miles. The Nile is actually formed by 2 rivers, the Blue Nile and the White Nile. They meet in Sudan, Egypt's neighbor to the south. Again, looking at that area where that arrow is pointing, I'm starting to think about that map and I'm looking at the picture that it's pointing to. And for me, I'm wondering what a delta is. I'm looking at that picture to help me describe it and understand it a little bit more. The river's name comes from a Greek word, Nilios, meaning valley. A photo from outer space shows why this is a very suitable name. The land along the river is green and lush. Only a short distance from the riverbank, desert takes over. Extensive irrigation brings the life-giving river water to crop fields and thirsty animals and people. In fact, 19 of every 20 Egyptians live within 12 miles of the Nile. If you look at that arrow to where it's pointing, I'm kind of connecting it to an important quote in the first paragraph. Back on slide number 2, I was thinking out loud about why this river was so important to the oldest civilization and how did a river feed people? Well, if you're looking in the red box on this slide, that arrow is pointing to a pretty good text clue about how important this river is and why so many people live close to it. The long history of civilization along the river emphasizes its importance to Egyptians. All of the famous monuments of ancient Egypt, the Sphinx, the pyramids, the temples, rise along the Nile. The ancient Egyptians worshipped the river as a god. They gave thanks each summer when melted snow from southern mountains made its way north. The gushing water flooded the Nile's banks. It spread a thick layer of fertile black mud where the Egyptians planted their food crops. Years without enough melted snow meant starvation and death for many. Too much rushing water could cause deadly floods. Just thinking out loud again, I'm wondering, why did those ancient Egyptians decide to build all of these beautiful and enormous monuments right along this river? And I'm also thinking again about the balance of that river level. Why was it so important that there wasn't too much or too little water? What were the effects of that? I know that I can probably find some text clues to help me figure that out. The Nile contributed much more than food to the ancient Egyptians. Along its banks grew a reed called papyrus. The Egyptians made paper out of papyrus, the word that gave us the English word paper. They even built boats from these reeds. The Nile also provided fish, shore birds, and other foods. Finally, the highway it provided was the best way to travel through the kingdom and to the Mediterranean. Wow, what an amazing thing that these Egyptians actually had a plant that gave us paper. They were one of the first people to ever invent paper. What an important contribution. Think about how their plant that provided paper affects us in school today. Today, Egyptians still depend on the Nile. It flows through the nation's capital, Cairo. However, they have learned to control its moody temper. One of the world's largest dams, the Aswan, was finished in 1970. It created the world's third largest reservoir, which fills with rainwater and snowmelt from the southern mountains. The water is released in controlled amounts to provide a steady water supply. The dam also produces huge amounts of hydropower. As with most dams, though, land and homes disappeared beneath the water when the reservoir was created. Wow, I'm starting to think more now about how the Nile is still important to Egyptians today. I know why it was important in the past, and now I'm thinking about how it's affecting even how they get electricity. I'm also looking at some of the captions and some of the photos on this page to help me understand some more about this text. One quick thing I'm thinking about before I end this passage is I thought it was really interesting how the author referred to the Nile as having a moody temper. That's something I'm going to have to infer. I'm going to have to use what I already know, plus some text clues to figure out why in the world the author would say a river had a moody temper. Okay, everybody, just a reminder that when you come into class tomorrow or anytime we're required to use some text evidence to support our answers, we always want to remember to justify your answer. On the left, you're going to see some sentence stems to help you do this. So tomorrow when you're answering some questions, you might say something like, number 5, according to the text, the author stated this. I know this because, based on what I read. Remember, text evidence is a great way for you to support your answers and good practice for when you need to read very complex text and understand deeply what the author is trying to tell us. Okay, the last slide I want to go over with you is how to make an inference. All of you are so incredibly smart and such excellent readers that I want you to remember how smart you are. When you're reading, don't be scared to use some of your own background knowledge, what you already know about things, plus what the text says to answer some questions. So, thinking back to that question about the author referring to the Nile as having a moody temper, in my head, I'm starting to think about what moody means, what a temper is. Then I'm thinking about some of these samples or examples from the text that maybe went along with the Nile having a temper, and I'm going to make my own inference about why the author included this. This is something we'll go over tomorrow as well. Okay, tomorrow when you come into class, please be prepared to answer this question, and then we will begin our partner talk, think, pair, share. The question will be, why is the Nile River so important? I'd like for you to come in with an idea or answer about why it's important and be prepared to write it as you're due now. Remember, you can use the discussion stems at the bottom to help you discuss with your partner. Thank you, everybody, for listening to this important passage. I am looking forward to seeing all of you tomorrow, and I hope you have a wonderful day.